One more thing. Thanks for tuning into my webinar. I'm Mary Bond, very glad to see you. Not see you, but be with you. And I want to start by thanking the Guild for Structural Integration, Elisa Noel and Amber Burnham Noel. This December will be the 9th year that I have given workshops for the Guild in Salt Lake City. So they've become dear friends and are responsible for me trying to do this thing this morning. So they've given me courage. And I'd also like to introduce two other people. First is Paul Worth. Where is Paul? Jean, I don't know.
Video to be re-enabled, Mary.
Okay, so we're just waiting. You'll see him in a minute. He's my volunteer for the movement lesson. I'm very grateful to him. He's a structural integration practitioner right in my own neighborhood. So that made it easy for this first attempt that I'm doing. And also,
Mary, can you try enabling my video? It doesn't seem to be working.
Okay. So sorry, we need you. No.
There we go. Let's see. There it is.
Just slow down. Okay.
There he is. Okay. So I was going to talk about Jean for a minute. Jean is a practitioner in Seattle, and she's going to be behind the scenes mostly, handling tech questions. So if you have little snafus, please put them in the chat, and Jean will try to help you. Jean has been my right-hand person in more ways than you can ever know, so I'm really grateful to her. So just remember, if you have technical difficulties, please put that in the chat. So my plan for today is to talk a little bit about assessing movement patterns, and then we'll watch some video that Paul put together for me, things I asked him to show on film, on whatever, not film. And then Paul and I will work together to see if we can find some options that might be useful to him in his life. And after that, I'll try and tell you why I did what I did. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A. So just remember, tech problems go in the chat and content questions go in the Q&A. So I want to talk a little bit now about body reading. So this is where I think that we learn to read bodies through two means. One is by hanging around somebody who does it well. So this is kind of like learning to read signs in a forest from a native tracker. You follow along, you pay attention, you listen, and you're patient. Gradually, you absorb this skill. It takes time. And the second way is by expanding your own sensory engagement, your own sensory literacy, your movement repertoire, as many novel ways, things that are not usual to you, ways to experience your body in the world. So do things that you don't normally do. Our bodies resonate with another's movements through our mirror neurons. So these are cells in our brain that reflect other people's movement. So when they do that, they engage our neuromuscular system. So this is the basis for why it's exciting to watch a soccer match or somebody on a trapeze. So, but our mirror neurons can be educated. So the more adaptable, experienced, and sensitive our own bodies are, the better our mirror neurons take in what somebody else is doing. And then that provides a basis for us being able to give them something that's actually useful in their life. I think movement patterns are trickier to see than structural patterns, but I think they're more important because we don't live our life standing upright in one spot. We move around, and it's those movements that we do over and over that form our neural and muscular and fascial systems into the shapes that we present to the world. So there are many systems for assessing bodies, and I think they all have merit. I don't think there's just one way to observe movement patterns or even structural patterns. You'll find what works for you by tracking a lot of trackers. I look at patterns through two main lenses. One is a basic understanding of biomechanics and an understanding of the composite movements of contralateral gait. The other is the concept that our bodies organize themselves through their orientation to the ground and to the space around us. So I'm looking for where in his body does my client experience receiving support from the ground? Where does he feel comfortable receiving that support? And where does he perhaps resist a little bit that support? So I'm interested in how my client embodies the weight of his bones, his malleoli, his rami, his scapula, ulnus, mandible. And I'm also looking for whether this person seems aware of his environment and to what degree his body seems able to take action in any direction. So we're going to watch a video of Paul. It's about 5 minutes long. I've asked him to do some simple movements. And I'd like to play it 2 times. Once with you just watching and no commentary. So you're just going to let your mirror neurons come alive and pay attention to Paul. So if you situate yourself now so your body feels comfortable and supported, and then extend your awareness to the periphery, to the space behind your body and the space around, so not just the screen. So try to keep a little bit of awareness of yourself in the space as you look at Paul, and that will help you differentiate yourself from him and also from the challenge of trying to see something. You have to kind of surrender that and hope for the best and let your mirror neurons do the job. So here goes. If I can figure out the screen share, Paul will be coming right up. Oops. Sorry. Yep, that was the wrong share. Sorry. I'll try it again. Okay, so we scrub it back to the beginning. All right. Okay. Right. So now I'll tell you what I think, or what interests me when as we watch it again. I like to.
Mary, this is Jean.
Yeah.
Before we replay it and you give your comments, if you have anything else open on your computer that you can close, the video was sometimes choppy for parts of it. I think there's just a network problem, you know, that, but if there's anything open else on your computer that you can close, if not, don't worry about it. Sometimes it was fine and sometimes it was a little choppy, but I don't think there's anything you could do that might help other than closing any other.
Yeah, I can close down the slideshow.
That might help. Okay, I'm going away.
Thank you. Can you hear me talking?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'd like to start with what's working well. And the fact that Paul volunteered for this tells me he's an adaptable and open sort of person. Watching him walk, I see a nice expression of the central line. It's displaced slightly to the left, but there's a smooth, steady, and resilient rhythm to his gait. I think if we asked him, he'd say that he feels more movement in his pelvis than in his shoulders. He might also say that he takes a bigger step with his left leg than his right. I'm going to scrub back again just to watch a little bit more of this. My guess is that the left hip swings through from the psoas, whereas the right hip flexes more with the quadriceps. So we can see contralateral movement up through his spine about to the level of his shoulder blades. And notice also the wrinkles on the right side of his shirt. Above the diaphragm, I think there's less spinal rotation. I think those wrinkles that you see indicate a right side bend in his lumbar area and compression of the iliopsoas muscle on that side. Paul told me that he had a bad injury to his right ankle. So we're probably looking at compensation for that. In sit to stand, Paul demonstrates that he's been to Rolfing school and he learned how to do this properly. He gets his weight over his feet and then he pushes down to go up. But when he arrives on the chair, he seems to plop a little bit, like that. So I wonder if we can find a way to encourage his core muscles to participate more in this movement. Here, let me stop it again. Watch this spot right there. When he folds forward, the front of his spine buckles right at that point. And this interests me because it's right in front of the area of his spine that bothers him. Watch it again, right there. And behind that, you see it's fairly flat. It doesn't really curve going down. Let me point that out, right through there. I'd also like to see a little more articulation through his cervicals. Here, we see that his weight doesn't settle down into the right ankle as well as into the left. And from the back, you see how the right heel isn't quite grounded as he bends his knees and ankles. The calf is short on the right side. I like to ask clients to show me this Z position because it gives me an idea of the range of motion in their hips and pelvic joints, sacroiliac joints. Paul is flexible enough to sit in these positions even though the right side psoas may be restricted. But now the arm raise tells me that how my client's body supports the movement of his arms. Paul shifts his weight back onto his heels as his arms come up. Watch his chest just above where it says hello.
Mary, people are asking if you can actually turn the video's volume all the way down. Some people are having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah.
So within the quick time,
I don't think I can.
you can. So see where it says 256 on next to the slider? The slider above that, just slide it all the way to the left. Then we'll just hear your voice.
Okay, so should we go back a bit?
I think that's a good idea to go back a bit.
How about this? Was interesting. Right here is where he buckles. So if you watch him folding down and then watch his back in the same region, you'll see that the vertebrae don't articulate quite as fully as they do above or below. So it's this flat spot right through there. So I think that's better, right, Jean?
Yeah, much better, Mary. Thank you.
All right, here we see, learning every day. His weight doesn't settle through the right ankle quite as well as through the left. I'll back up a little bit again. You see that again. See this ankle as he bends? He just can't quite get down into that foot. That's the foot that had the injury. Watch the right heel as he bends. The right heel lifts a little bit. So that's because he doesn't have that range of motion through the ankle joint. The Z position gives me an idea of range of motion through the hips and sacroiliac joints. Paul is flexible enough, so he sits in those positions fairly comfortably. And that's not surprising because when he walks, his pelvis works quite well, even though he has that restriction through the right psoas, which you could see here. So the arm raise tells me how my client's body supports the movement of his arms. Paul shifts his weight back onto his heels when his arms come up. If you watch his chest next time he turns around, just above where it says hello, his clavicle dips as his arm raises. That tiny action right there. It seems to pull down on the front of his neck, and you can see it draws his head forward. So it looks to me as though it's easier for Paul to turn his head to the left than to the right. He goes to the right, goes farther to the left. Makes me suspect a cervical left side bend, maybe some issues in the atlanto-occipital joint. As Paul raises his arms in Tai Chi, watch for the same pattern across the clavicles here. Just drops a tiny bit. His instructor has been teaching him to soften his rib cage, and this makes me think that Paul needs better differentiation between his experience of his rib cage and his experience of his arms and shoulders. I like watching how carefully he senses the ground as he shifts his weight from foot to foot. But I wonder whether he might be able to experience this shift of weight through his hips as well as in his feet. He does that when he's walking, so I think this will be easy for him to find. And I want to conclude this part by saying I never think that I have to be right in my body reading opinion. It's just an opinion. But it gives me a place from which to begin my inquiry with the client. And as we go along, my client will set me straight. So now we need to see me and Paul. If you can.
Also, if you unmute and turn on your video.
There.
Perfect.
Good. So what do you think, Paul? How did that sit with you?
I think you're right about everything. And something new that I noticed, as you'll probably get into, one of my main complaints is kind of around T8 to T10. And while you were pointing out the more flexible and the less flexible part of my thoracic spine, I realized that I think it's in the less flexible part that I'm noticing my discomfort. It's that part is locked in extension, and the area just above does all the flexion.
Yeah, it's locked in extension. That's why we can't see those several vertebral segments fall back as you curve. Yeah, I hope people could see that you could see it, maybe they could see it.
Yeah, cool.
Of course, you were in it. Anything else? Anything? I feel like Rachel Maddow. Is it anything I said that is incorrect or just plain wrong?
Wrong at all. And yeah, let's see. What you said about at the end about Tai Chi and feeling the transition through my hips immediately resonated. I could feel that while I tried it out of my body, just as hearing you say that. And you mentioned briefly you mentioned in walking that my verticality tends to hover more over the left, and that's definitely my experience. That this ankle injury was 25 years ago, I think, and it continues to be an exploration to try to get my sense of root or connection into my right below my right foot, rather than have my body manage my right side from my left side. Yeah.
So this is a perfect client. This is one of those clients that you pay to come in your door because he's already figured out most of his stuff. And I know he's going to be a piece of cake. Well, let's hope. Anyway, let me find out, Paul, in general, what feels good in your body?
Um, even though I have ankle problems, my feet always feel really good.
Your feet. Mm-hmm.
Great. My hands and feet feel good. Yeah. My belly feels good, except even though I tend to hold it kind of flat unless I pay attention.
Oh, so what does that mean, paying attention?
Well, noticing that, oh, there's that pattern again where I'm holding my belly and diaphragm. Okay.
And you're holding them like in or out or?
In drawing my belly button back a little bit, and then there's a kind of from here to here, it's kind of doesn't.
Okay.
I'm not aware of it.
Some Pilates teachers would teach you to do that.
Yeah.
But the thing for you, as you demonstrate that just locks up more the exact spot in your spine that we're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right in thinking that's probably not the best thing for you to do. So you'd like help with T9 more or less, and the right-left balance. I don't know if we can do all of that, but we can do something useful.
And you said I also feel like they're two parts of one pattern. So
chances are good. So let's start with you sitting on a chair.
Okay.
While he's getting the chair, I'm going to talk about the pelvic rami. So here's a little teeny tiny pelvis for everybody to look at. That's the front. This is just because I know there's some people who maybe aren't body nerds. So the front right here is the pubic bone, the sacrum here and back, the sit bones down here, and this is the ramus. You see this kind of rocker thing. So that's what we're sitting on. We've been taught to sit on the sitting bones, but that generally puts us too far back in the pelvis. I don't think that's what I want to go on and on about right now, though. I just want you to be aware that you're sitting on your, yeah, he is. So if you sit with your knees kind of slanting down a little bit.
You want me perpendicular like this?
Yeah, that works great. Yeah, and so now just stand up and sit down again a couple times so the feeling of standing up and sitting down is fresh for you. Okay, perfect, thank you. So now I want all of us, and it's nice that the viewers, you can, try these things too, in a regular demo, you would be impolite if you were getting on the floor and trying things, but you can do it in your own living room. So Paul, if you could just envision your own rami, and you're sitting kind of forward of the back of it. The sit bone is the back of the ramus. So you're just sitting a little bit forward of that sit bone. And so I want to just say also that these rami, I'm going to point it out once more, could be thought of as the feet of the pelvis. So you're sitting on the insteps of your pelvic feet. If you were sitting on your heels of your pelvic feet, just do that for a moment. Sit on the sit bones. Yeah, and so now he's like rocked too far back.
That triggers that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so it triggers the problem because when you sit too far back on your sit bone, then you're not getting good support from your feet and you have to support somewhere else. So if you sit in the middle of the pelvic feet, you have a better chance of feeling supported. So now, just for a moment, if you would hover your right ramus up off the chair. And then lower it down as slowly as you possibly can. I should have started with the left ramus. Let's do the left ramus.
And I'm assuming you mean just like minimal effort?
Yeah, minimal. It doesn't even really, it's just, you're just unweighting it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could spin the chair around so we can see you from the front just briefly so we can see.
So left, raising the little.
Yeah, the left is good. That's perfect.
I'm getting a response in my right knee.
Sorry?
I'm getting a kind of response in my right knee as I do that.
Yeah, okay. And then lower the left ramus slow. Yeah, that's it. And then this is going to be a kind of a quick and dirty ride through this. You know, we could spend a lot of time on it, but I don't think it's the main issue. It's just something I want to start with. So lift the left one again, or sorry, the right one again, just a wee bit. Yeah, and feel how you have to do that from a different place in your body.
Then the other way around.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's different. It's more habitual. It's easier.
Right. That's right. Because you do that all the time, you lift that one. So letting this one settle down is more like, what? Yeah. Okay.
When I feel the wrinkles in the shirt that you pointed out when I try to let this settle down.
Right. Okay, so what I wanted to do with that was just to really draw your attention to your rami. Okay, so, you know, we're not going to try to balance them or, you know, make them hunky-dory right now. We're just trying to locate them in you.
Mm-hmm.
And think of them as having weight. So maybe just, you know, the feeling of letting them back down onto the chair. Just really take in that feeling of dropping them down, letting them be heavy.
I feel little bubbles in my spine, little floaty feelings.
Oh, I'm going to pay you a lot of money for all these good responses. Okay.
Well, I wanted to say too, in the first minute of when I was turned this way, and you were bringing me into the rami in the beginning, I felt two little decompressions in my neck.
You're just so connected.
Probably helps that 150 people or whatever are helping.
Yeah, everybody's on your side. So if you could spin it around a little bit sideways again, and then just stand up. Just stand up, don't think about it. Okay, and so take, and then you could look at us again. Do a very few little movements of shifting your weight from one leg to the other. You can do Tai Chi arms if you want to, but I'm mostly interested in just the experience of you going from foot to foot, but also realizing that your pelvic feet are also helping you shift your weight.
Okay, just trying to get myself a little better lit.
Yeah, yeah.
So just shifting left to right slowly?
Yeah, just the kind of movement from one foot to another that you do in Tai Chi. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. You feel how there's a left ramus there to help catch you.
Feels like a counterbalance under, like the, what do you call it? The thing on the bell that hangs underneath it.
Perfect. Flapper.
It's harder to get the right.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Take your time going to the left. Just go from left to right again, sorry. And take a little more time really feeling your search for your right ramus.
Oh.
Any news?
The feeling I'm getting is like various muscle groups are like, no, you can't have it. Protecting it, you know.
We're keeping that ramus up there in your diaphragm for you. That's where it goes. Okay, so this is something you could work with, right? Okay, so let's go back to sitting and standing. And just a few times without thinking about it too much, just know that you have a ramus, that's two rami actually, and they're going to sit on the chair. Right, and you're going to push the rami up. As you push your feet down, the pelvic feet go up. Right. Let's do that a couple more times. Is that any different from your other?
Yeah, I'm gonna try going back to habit here. Yeah. What the first thing that I clearly noticed was when I sent the feet and rami away from each other, I came into the space more. Mm-hmm. When I try to go back to habit, I feel drawn down toward the ground.
Right. Right, because the habit is just a movement. It's not a relationship. What you just found for yourself was a relationship to ground and space through the simple act of standing up from a chair. Okay, that's great. Okay, let's do some things with your upper body. I want to try an experiment. You can think about this, and all the viewers can think about this too. This is what is it? This is a left scapula. You're looking at the front of it. This is the collarbone. And notice underneath the collarbone is this little projection right here. It's the coracoid process. So if you find the top of your humerus, just kind of grab the top of your humerus, and then let your thumb dig around gently underneath the clavicle, and you'll find a little thing that feels like a marble. Got it? It's like a little marble right there. And then just move your scapula forward and back, and notice how the marble comes forward and back. Not your arm. You don't have to move your arm. Just move your scapula. Yeah. So give it a little sensory stimulation. And then find the one on the other side. So find the humeral head and then find the marble with your thumb. And the next part is for you to just lie on the ground. You'll have to fix the camera a little bit.
Break. With my feet facing you, I forget. This
head facing us. So we see your head and shoulders. And you can have your feet bent, feet standing, so your knees are bent. Yeah. Okay. A little bit to your right.
Move myself to my right?
About an inch. Perfect, right there. Okay. Okay, so does that feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay, so just touch your coracoid processes just to remind yourself where they are. And then you can relax your arms and put your arms wherever they're comfortable. Doesn't matter where they are. And then we're just going to breathe for a minute. So you just inhale any old way at all, through the nose preferably. And on exhalation, I'd like you to try to sense the weight of your body in general, just everything settling down onto the wood, just the way your rami were settling down onto the chair before. You're just paying attention. So feel the weight of your upper arms and your elbows. So each time you exhale, there's an opportunity to catch the sensation of being weighted.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to feel the weight in the back of your head, so your cranium resting against the floor. If this turns out to be a useful thing, you might want to practice it on a yoga mat or something a little more inviting. But wood is good. Anyway, just exhaling. How is that going?
It's good. It's tuning me into places that are comfortable connecting to support and others that can't find it.
Mm-hmm. So we could spend a lot of time helping you find those places. But I'm not going to do that right now because I'm just doing a demo and we're indicating things, some of them, and not going deeply. But I'd like to see if you can feel the ankle bones on your 2 feet. Just you sort of know where they are. There are those 2 bumps on either side, just above your foot.
Yeah.
So you just, as you exhale, just drain some weight down into those bones. Okay. So the next thing is to keep that. So exhalation is always the most important. But I'm going to invite you to inhale. And when you inhale, be aware of your coracoid processes floating up. So floating toward the ceiling. So each time you breathe in, you just breathe in a ordinary way, except you notice your coracoid processes just moving forward a little tiny bit. And then when you exhale, forget all about that and focus on being weighted. Okay, so be careful that you don't seek that coracoid movement by breathing in more air than you need. That's a tricky thing with this kind of intervention, is just to breathe in an ordinary way and see, can they float? Just because I want them to. And then after that inhalation, you exhale and just completely forget about it. Never going to do that again. Until next time.
Yeah, that's a new movement for them.
Yeah. I really like those coracoid bones. I think they're a useful place to know about because they're on the front, but they are the scapula.
Yeah.
So this, I think, could become a practice. I think before we decide about that, though, you should bring yourself up to standing and just take a moment to adjust the camera and stand up.
One more.
Yeah.
Different already.
Okay. So can you say what your awareness is?
Well, there's a little bit of a battle going on, but or a negotiation, I guess. But what's new that's there to be negotiated with is doing the coracoid exercise gave me more lift through the upper 3 or 4 ribs. But I wasn't expecting that, because if I want more lift in the upper 3 or 4 ribs, I usually pay attention to the ribs or the lungs. But this, especially if I give a little contact,
Yeah.
it gives that, they can articulate, they can Venetian blind.
Yeah, fantastic. So think about it. The coracoids are part of the shoulder blade, and the shoulder blade is pressing down on your rib cage. So if you try to raise the ribs, they can't go anywhere because the coracoids are like little thumbs keeping them down.
Mm-hmm. So what is this doing? It's suggesting they can relate in some other way, and not just.
Yeah. So what I said earlier was, I think you need more differentiation between your rib cage, your experience of your rib cage, and your experience of your shoulder girdle. They operate, when I watch you do Tai Chi, they operate as if it's all one unit. And so this is my first attempt at trying to begin that process of giving you, 2 places in your body instead of just an upper body. Okay. So I think that's useful. So that could be a practice that you could do, just that simple breathing practice. But I'm greedy, and this is a demo, so we're going to try and do more. That would be enough for one lesson. I'm just telling that to the people watching, that, a little bit is usually plenty. He's got 2 really major things that he could work with in walking, Tai Chi, whatever he does, the dishes, right? But
as you're saying that, and you just said the 2 things, I went, what? Okay, that Raymond, and just holding the 2 together in the consciousness adds another dimension too.
Yeah, it's plenty. Yeah. So I'm really torn. Maybe I shouldn't do this next piece, but I'm greedy. So I'll tell you what, we'll do it, but if it starts to feel like that's too much, too many sensations to incorporate, then we'll just go back to just this much. Okay. All right. So the next thing is, I'm going to show you a movement that I need you to do.
Hey, Mary and Paul, while we do this, I want to make sure that we can see all of Paul for this next piece in the video. Some people were wanting to see the lower body. So Paul, if you can futz with this as Mary demonstrates.
Sure.
Except he needs to watch what I'm doing, because he doesn't know.
Okay.
See my whole body? We need to move down. Can you see my arms?
Yep, you're good, Mary. Maybe a tiny, tiny scooch away, an inch. Perfect.
Okay, so you're going to be lying on your back with your hands resting on your thighs. And you're going to just slide your arm up your thigh to the ceiling. Just that. Just that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that good?
Nope. You have to scoot away. Yeah, I think that will be fine.
My hand starts on the floor? No.
Be just at your pockets, yeah. And I just want to say something for the viewers that when I look at him in this position, I'm unhappy with the way his head feels on the ground. I just want to point this out. We're not going to fix it. We're just going to let him be uncomfortable. But I think it would be nicer if he just had a towel, just a little folded towel under his head to let his cranium rest more down. I don't know if you can see what I'm talking about. You can pretend you have a towel, Paul. So you're going to just slide your arm down your leg and up to the sky. Yeah, and I know that we can't see your hand, but it doesn't matter. What I'd like you to do next is reach those fingertips toward the ceiling a lot. Just reach your arm and your fingertips so that your scapula, you feel your scapula come up off the ground, right? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is see if you can leave your arm and your glenohumeral joint, the head of your humerus, leave that up in the air and just see if you can lower your scapula to the ground.
Oh,
Isn't that fun?
that's cool. That's cool.
Okay, so you're right there. And now you got your scapula resting. And then finally, you're allowed to let the head of the humerus come down into that socket. More. Okay. So let's do it again. Reach your hand to the sky. And then bring the scapula. And try to bring only the scapula.
That's really a cool feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I feel opening and articulation in my like middle thoracic spine doing that.
Okay, and then you let the humeral head find that little half of a cup that it sits in. Okay, and then one more tiny thing. If you just leave your scapula where it is and just lift the humeral head and put it back down. So you're just gonna experiment with moving your arm out of the socket and back in. I mean, it doesn't really come out, but
yeah,
that tiny little pulsation. Okay, and then just let your arm come down in a comfortable way. Just drop it. All right. And just notice how that shoulder feels and the other shoulder feels.
very different. And my whole side from my and my rib cage halfway through my neck, it feels different on the right side.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we better do side two. I'm doing very funny looking Tai Chi. Okay, so the first part, pretend you never did it before. It's a whole new shoulder, you know. Just, we can't assume it's going to have the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the work is just to raise your arm to the sky. Feel that lift in the scapula. And the scapula comes down. It's a little clunkier, isn't it?
Yeah. It's more eager.
More what?
It's more eager, like.
Yeah, it wants to do it. Well, you know how that is. You just have to invite it to take a little more time.
There we go.
Yes. You feel how your axilla has gotten more spacious. Your armpit has more air in it.
The grabby place in my around T9 is more related to this shoulder, it feels like. Because it's like trying to get this articulation is making that grabby place complain.
Okay, so let's relax the arm. Just put it down and just take a moment to go back to just breathing and letting yourself rest on the wood. Just forget all of this, everything. Just be appreciative of your ability to let gravity support you. So I know that Paul will go ahead and explore all this by himself in his own time. We could spend a lot more time with that. I actually think this is 2 lessons, not just one. I think I was right that this is maybe sort of extra and manifestation of my greed in sharing with this stuff with you. But
just that when I felt like it was complaining, I didn't mean it wasn't grabbing harder. It was just that for the shoulder to do what you were asking, it was causing something to want to change here.
oh wow, okay. Well, sorry, I was misinterpreted the word complain.
Well, I think it started to. The message is getting through. So.
Okay. So we only have a few more minutes if we're going to take time for Q&A. So I think the thing to do, even though this is a little incomplete, is for you to just stand up and see if we can see most of your body somehow. Yeah.
Chop my head off.
Okay. All right. So let's just see any new impressions.
The impression is like a familiar fog, but with lights shining in it. The lights are where there's this new information. The fog is like, okay, I still have this like clamping. There's new things, new little elements of freedom that I'm feeling. There's a little more float here. There's a ability to be heavy here, the Reimai.
So
breathing that doesn't quite know just how free it can get yet.
Okay. Could you do that? We're going to do that simple arm raise that we did in the intake video. But before you start, remind yourself that you have Reimai and coracoids, and then bring your arms forward like a sleepwalker and see what that feels like.
That's different.
Yeah, don't you think?
Yeah, I feel I don't feel the clavicle, but I feel the upper, like my upper lungs.
Yeah. Show from the side, because maybe that's also helpful for people. Reimai. Yeah. So I think, this webinar is recorded, so you could go back and look at him doing that in the beginning of the webinar and then compare this. But I think what we're seeing is beginning for that arm movement, for the head of the humerus to come back into the socket as part of the arm raise. Yeah, and he doesn't sway back onto his feet the way he as much as before. Anyway, so just for 30 seconds, do a little bit of Tai Chi.
Okay. I'm a beginner, folks, so anyone who's really experienced, don't judge me.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, I'm not interested in how it looks. I'm interested in how it feels to you.
That's different right there. It's like my ribs are accordioning.
Yeah. I'm going to interrupt you because it's beautiful. I think that worked.
Good, yeah.
So
Embracing with my arms rather than just bracing.
so cool. So I had like a little speech about coaching movement, you know, what's involved in it, but I'm not going to make that speech right now. I'll make it next week on Friday. I'll talk more about, you know, what I think are the elements of this kind of work and some more detail about designing interventions for your client. But right now,
we're going to do some Q&A.
Read some Q&A and I'll do my best. And also, Paul, if there's questions you could help me answer.
Okay.
So the first question comes from Jill. And her question for you, Mary, is, I'm curious as to why you chose to work on the clavicle shoulder girdle stuff you saw in the assessment rather than the posterior flat spot, anterior spot in the lower thorax. What were you considering as you prioritized what to work on in the session?
Okay. Well, I'm a Rolfer, right? And what we have to do is differentiate, decompress. And the idea is to get that spatial organization within the body. A lot of times the nagging problem will go away. So that's why we do a 10 series. We don't do fix-it work. And it's the same with movement, I think. So that was one consideration, is it's like, I was pretty sure that that spot would get some benefit if we could get it more support from below and lift something off of it from above. So that's why, basically.
Awesome. The next question comes from Elizabeth Wheeler. When demonstrating in the video, you said Paul plopped, and you mentioned he needed to engage his core more. Can you expand what you mean by that?
Yeah, it wasn't completely smooth the way he lowered himself to the ground. He was doing the proper mechanics of getting his weight over his feet and pushing the ground to go up and then coming down. It's like he just didn't have quite complete control over the descent. But when he got an awareness of his rami, that went away. So something about having that awareness of the pelvic floor bones engaged the transversus, the obliques, whatever, so that they automatically worked for him. Is that your experience, Paul?
Yeah. And when I'm remembering that and feeling it, just as though I'm thinking about what if I sit down right now, because the questioner brought up engaging my core, I feel it almost as though my inner worm, where the rami surround the bottom of my visceral chamber, it feels like before when I plopped, the whole torso just kind of came as one unit, not differentiating my core and sleeve. And now it's like, I can even feel if I pay attention to my rami, like they almost stretch my guts in a comfortable way.
Yeah. Yes.
The gut will sit down and then my sleeve can follow the guts.
Yeah. This is a perfect example of if you can awaken the right sensation in someone's body, the coordination will follow. The coordination will kick in. And mentioning the core, it's like, it doesn't mean he needs to exercise the core or that his core is weak or any of that, or that he thinks about his core. It's just I found a way to trick him into using it.
Next question is from Alan Kaplan. When you were demonstrating with Paul sitting on his stool, you were talking about unweighting the ramus from one side or the other. And Alan's question was, how do you do this? Is this an internal thing? What kind of muscular engagement is taking place? Can you speak to that and the language around that, Mary?
Well, actually, yeah, this is not my favorite way to bring attention into the rami. Okay, it was just like, I think of a quick way to demonstrate or to get Paul to feel. So I'm not really interested in whether in what's being engaged. I think psoas iliacus, all the deep internal gut muscles, probably some adductors. I don't know, maybe quadratus lumborum on some people. It doesn't matter to me right then how they do it. It's just that they get a feeling of, oh, it's up, and now I can slowly let it down, and I can feel it come down. So I don't even if they hiked their shoulder, I wouldn't care if they felt their ramus in the end. So I'll show you my favorite way. This is a little crazy, but my favorite way to help somebody find their ramus, if I don't know that they can feel it, is to just feel it. Put your hand on the sit bone, a hand on the pubic bone, and walk your fingers down around there little by little, not that fast. But a lot of people have no idea that there's a bone there. It's a really, really helpful place in ourselves to know. Okay.
Well, Mary, it's 11:14, so if we're going to end on time, maybe you have any closing comments, or Paul closing comments?
I want to answer one more question.
Okay. There was one from, sorry. Sarah McLennan asked that earlier on, she noticed right away that Paul's T8 to T12 area and forward bending, and then you tied it into his rami. Can you repeat what is the connection between this place in Paul and his rami? And the part two of that is, it's interesting that the coracoid and ribs are not differentiated. It's so subtle, but it also ties into the T8 to T10 rami issue.
Well, I don't know what the T8 to T10 issue is. I think Paul has some suspicions about breathing and breath and other kinds of tensions in the solar plexus area. Is that right? So in terms of the fascial anatomy, I don't know the connection. Somebody else could answer that. But for me, it was that if I wanted to help to, what I said before is to just help him find more support from below so that that place up there could begin to drop down. And then the other thing was to take this lid off from above also so that that place in the middle could decompress. I don't think I answered that question very well, but I think the whole thing may have a lot to do with his right ankle, but that's another adventure some other time.
Yeah.
Just if I can briefly summarize what I feel related to that is that the right ankle, I think both specific to the trauma of the time and also just the couple decades of dealing with it, there's a kind of pull up through, this is me pulling up from my right foot, and that pull started actually up in my T5, T6 around 3 years after the injury. But then I think it really centralized in like from the psoas up right into the diaphragm because they're one system. And then, so I think it's really a kind of a back of diaphragm psoas pull. From the back of the diaphragm, I guess it goes right into T8, T10. Makes sense. And I think with that pull, I think maybe, not just think, that I feel it has to be pulling from somewhere, and it's getting the whole rib cage and shoulders as an anchor to pull my foot up. That's my feeling.
Were you on crutches with that thing for a while?
Briefly. I was on a farm when I injured it, and I didn't really get much medical attention, and so I spent a month hopping on one leg. So there you go.
Go back to the history. Okay. Thank you, Paul, so much, and thank you, Jean, for just being there and helping, and thank you to Amber and Elisa from the Guild for encouraging me to do this. And next week, we'll see how this process will be with a completely different client, different person. And that's next Friday, the 22nd at 10. And it's a separate, I think you have to register separately. So this is recorded. It'll be eventually get put on my YouTube channel and also on the Guild's website. So you can watch it again. Okay, thanks so much. See you next time.
Thanks, Mary.